Race Against the Machine is a very interesting book. It's gotten a lot of popularity because it's targeting an issue that is front and center for a lot of people in the United States and around the world, namely the issue of jobs creation and unemployment. Essentially, the thesis of the book, the authors Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee make the point that their goal is to introduce technology as a key engine of the changes that we're looking at in terms of unemployment and job creation. And so the book really focuses very heavily on the pace of technology innovation at one level, highlighting the exponential improvement in price and performance of technologies, but then focuses on the impact that has in terms of increasingly taking away jobs through automation, that more and more jobs that we thought were going to be immune from automation are increasingly becoming vulnerable to automation because of the power of technology. And at that level, I think it's a very powerful book. Technology is advancing at a very rapid pace, and it is becoming more and more able to take over activities that we as humans have been performing. I think the issue is, though, by framing the challenge as a technology challenge, what they miss is the reason why these jobs are so vulnerable to technology. Essentially, if you step back and look at what the modern corporation is and how it evolved through a model that we describe as a push model. Basically, it has to do with developing forecasts and predictions and then making sure that the right people are in the right place at the right time and following tightly scripted activities to respond to that demand. And stepping back from that, that's a formula for automation. If you have tightly scripted jobs that are highly standardized, where there's no room for individual initiative or creativity, machines, by and large, can do those kinds of activities much better than human beings. They're much more predictable, they're much more reliable. We as human beings have flaws, we tend to get distracted, we tend to go off into unexpected areas. And so I think that the real reason that we have such an issue in terms of unemployment and job loss through automation is that we've crafted these jobs exactly so that they would be vulnerable to automation. We've put kind of a bullseye target on workers around the United States and around the world and said, come after me, shoot me. I'm the target for automation. Technology is not the root cause. Technology is simply going after the target that's been put on the screen. The root cause is how we've defined work in companies. And that the opportunity now is to step back and say, is that the way we need work to be done? One of the issues is this formula for how work is conducted was developed in the last century, and it was based on a set of infrastructures and assumption of a stable environment that made it easy to define standardized, highly scripted work. Now we're in a world that's more rapidly changing, more uncertainty, more of those extreme events that Taleb calls the black swans, that make it really critical for us as individuals in the workplace to take much more initiative, to be constantly exercising creativity and imagination to respond to the unexpected events. That's a very different model of work. It requires a very different way of organizing our institutions and a different set of work practices that are much harder to automate. When you have that kind of imagination, creativity, trust-based relationships that are required to really address these hard problems, it makes it much less vulnerable to that kind of automation. And so my belief is that if you focus on that as the root cause, now the problem is not technology. The problem is, how do we innovate our institutions and our work practices so that we in fact can. The authors have a very nice phrase that they call, rather than race against the machine, we ought to start racing with the machine. Unfortunately, I don't think they develop that very well in the book. They kind of offer it as a case for optimism at the very end without a lot of deep content. But the content, I think, about racing with the machine is stepping back and reassessing what are our institutions for, what kinds of work practices are required in order to pursue that institutional mission. And in that context, I think you now are able to race with the machine.